We are back, everyone, on Morning Line on this Wednesday. Nick Beres, along with Professor John Weil from over at MTSU. And we can take some phone calls if you want to jump in. Your thoughts, politics. We were touching bases just a moment ago on the Pennsylvania race, which still remains close, but is a real battle between, Democrat and a Republican stronghold, which could, give a hint maybe as to what we're going to see in other races come, the midterms. Also, we can talk about some of the campaign issues, what's happening here in Tennessee. Teachers being armed, all that are going to be issues. Let's take a call from Joe and see what he thinks. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
Just a couple of questions for the professor.
Sure.
What is his take on Trump? I think he's fired 15 to 17 people since he's been in office. It's more than the last 3 or 4 presidents together have fired. The guy didn't seem like it. He hires these people, and most of them seem to be fairly intelligent folks. If they don't disagree with him or say something he doesn't like, he just fires them. I think he still thinks he's on that TV show.
Yes.
Where he can say you're fired.
Although he doesn't apparently do it to their face.
No,
he first tweets it and
tweets it to Rex Tillerson. I mean, I'm with you, Joe. I wonder, Professor, because I hear what he's saying there, and my concern about any leader, be it Donald Trump or anyone else, is that they surround themselves with nothing but yes men.
Right.
And I just worry in Donald Trump's case, and maybe I've seen it in other politicians as well, someone who just doesn't agree necessarily. Hey, ultimately, it's still going to be the president's call, but it seems like you don't agree, you're out. And the last thing I want is any leader being surrounded by complete yes men without giving him some other things to think about.
Sure. We do need to remember about half of them that have left on their own.
That's right. That's right. That's
so
true.
It's sort of a two-way street there. I think part of it, Trump certainly has a lot of experience as a businessman, but as we've talked about before, he wasn't a military leader. He hasn't held previous political office, and so I think he doesn't have quite the stable of political people to bring in. And Tillerson, it's hard to know what to say about that. I don't think he was a very effective Secretary of State. Some of it had to do with differences in policy with Trump, but quite apart from that, he doesn't seem to have been a terribly effective manager of the State Department.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know, but here we are, the first time, I believe, in world history that a leader of North Korea is going to meet with a counterpart. Now he's met with Secretary of State, but he's never met, to my knowledge, with a foreign leader before. And we're maybe 2 months away, and we're not quite sure who our Secretary of State's going to be. So,
well, and now we know they're moving the head of the CIA over
Pompeo.
there.
I mean, they have a nominee, but
talk about this, because as I look at this with the president, and I always kind of wondered with prior presidents, I know the problem with North Korea. And I know the threat that they can potentially pose. And I always wondered, okay, why doesn't the president, as opposed to an underling, maybe, go sit? And I always heard the answer was, look, to meet with the president, is legitimizing a regime. And we don't want to legitimize, this regime by sending our leader there to talk with him, because what they're doing is so god-awful. And now,
it is.
And it is. But on the other hand, to do nothing or to try, and I guess Secretary of States and such, but I mean, when I think about Donald Trump going there, I'm open-minded to that. I mean, it seems like none of this other stuff
what's fascinating here is Tillerson sort of got in the doghouse a month or two ago for suggesting this kind of thing, and now it's being done, and he's off the scene.
Right.
Or will be at the end of the month.
Does the president's meeting with the North Korean leader, if it happens, and I think it might, and what does that mean? Does it legitimize North Korea, or hopefully that opens up a dialogue a bit, because I think we've all worried about their nuclear weapons.
Right.
Now, whether the president meets with them and whatever this leader, Kim Jong-un, tells him, will we really ever be able to verify if they've gotten rid of their nukes?
They have not in the past. There have been several times where they were supposed to have dismantled their nuclear program, and of course it didn't happen. So I'm fairly skeptical as to whether something will. I think the greatest fear would be that they have a meeting that really goes south, and instead of sort of keeping this current situation, one or the other decides they need to go to war.
Yeah, but I just would think, as ugly as it's gotten with some of the back and forth, little Rocket Man and all this kind of stuff, face to face, I just can't help but think that, you know, it's got to be better than what we've had.
Well,
and I don't know. I mean, and because it's really the theater of the absurd. Because short of this president going over there, think about who this North Korean leader has met with that's American.
Basketball players.
Dennis Rodman. Good Lord, it's Dennis Rodman who's been the one over there, not negotiating. Goes up. But apparently he's a basketball fan. You know, Kim Jong-un's father was a big fan of Michael Jordan.
Yes.
And but apparently like NBA basketball. But it's like Dennis Rodman. So I'm like, well, gosh, you know, good. I'm open to the idea because whatever's work done in the past by ignoring them and just kind of sending in sanctions. And I'm not saying sanctions aren't a good thing, but hasn't made any developments.
I think
why not go talk to him face to face and maybe develop some kind of friendship? Who maybe this Kim Jong-un then maybe goes along with it, and I mean,
it seems like maybe the sanctions have been tightened under Trump.
Yeah,
and you know, with that sort of, I think Ung has a little bit of cover now because of the Olympics, and you can sort of attribute it to, well, it's because they came down the teams and whatever, but maybe he has a little bit of cover to do something that he wouldn't have had before.
Right.
But the sanctions are probably really what are driving this.
Driving it, because it just shuts them down and it's very hard on their economy.
Right.
Let's go to Reverend Fuzz. Hi, Reverend.
Hey, Nick. Hey. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I got a question. For 2 years when President Trump was running for office, man, every day somebody railed that there's no way he's going to win, all the way from the establishment down to some of my closest friends. He's not going to win. He's not going to win. And every time they say that, he won.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Okay. Now he's been president a couple of years, or however long it's been, a couple of decades, it seems. Okay. Now, in Tennessee, if an election was held right now for president, polls are showing that Donald Trump would win Tennessee. In spite of all Nick's railing against him, he would still win Tennessee. I don't know what other states and national, but I'm going to ask you, and everybody keeps saying he's coming out of office before the end of the year. Okay, so unfortunately, I had a dream that President Trump won re-election. Okay. What do you think right now? Do you think that if the election was held, that President Trump would still win an election in spite of all you guys on Fox and wherever?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. I'm bringing up points, and I agree with the Reverend, though, that here in Tennessee, I still think if there was an election today, and we don't know who they would have him up against.
We don't know. I think one of the
if he was running against Hillary again in Tennessee, it's a no-brainer. Trump wins.
I think
now,
that's
would there be a Democrat maybe Tennesseans would look at? Even then, I don't think so at this point. Now, maybe ask me again in 2 years.
Right.
What do you think?
We need the Democrats to beat Trump. Seem like they need a young Joe Biden. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders.
Said she's not going to.
You know, Oprah Winfrey. There are a lot of Democratic office holders, and as hard as it is for the Democrats, as it is, you know, just as hard as it is for the Republicans to sort of move to the middle, if the Democrats do that sufficiently, I think they have a decent chance. But again, I mean, there's. You know, I have to say again, Kent Seiler and I, the closest we came to predicting this was the so-called Mae West effect. That, you know, anytime she had to choose between the lesser of two evils, she tried the one she hadn't tried before.
Yeah.
And I do think that accounts for a lot of what happened. You know, it's like, well, give it a try. You know, and go out. You know, go outside the swamp. Go outside D.C. Is it working out? Well,
they'll have to decide as we see. But it's interesting, the names you just said, you know, Warren and Oprah and all those, I think it's pretty clear that, and Biden, they're not going to be in the mixed run. It's pretty clear to me that whoever's going to run, you know, against him is someone we don't have on the radar right now. I mean, they may be big in their state, wherever it is, but I agree, it's going to be someone that we don't know yet. I don't know what other names are being thrown out there, but that aren't known nationally. They may be known in California, they may be known in some other states, but we don't know who it is yet.
Well, and there is a chance, you know, depending on what happens in Korea and a lot of other places, there is a chance that Trump will be a challenge for the Republican nomination.
Oh, okay. Think about that.
You know, you see this on, ironically, on the trade issue over all the other things that Trump has done that are sort of outside the box with Republicans. This is one that's, free trade is pretty dear to most Republican hearts. Yeah. And depending on, you know, and especially if he pushes it to the extent that we end up with some kind of trade war, you may have a tradition, you know, a Romney or someone of that stripe, you know, or maybe a Jeff Flake from Arizona or something. Yeah. I mean, he's already sort of talking about not necessarily that he would do it, but that there probably will be a challenge within the Republican Party itself.
Let's take a break on that note. When we come back, more of your phone calls. Lines open 737-7587. What do you think? Politics right after this.